I would like to offer a very warm welcome to those who have joined us for the 21 Days Habit Challenge either yesterday or joining us today from wherever you are in the world. And I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you who have been with us for the last 5 days of our 21 Days Habit Challenge. I feel very delighted to be in your presence once again. A quick recap of our day 4, which was yesterday. In our discussion yesterday, we said we have to make our habit goals very smart. And to make our habit goals smart means the S in the SMART was being very specific. M in the SMART stood for a habit goal should be measurable. A stood for they should be attainable. R was for having those goals which are realistic. And T was for keeping our habit goals time-bound. And in our discussion yesterday, we focused more on the M of the SMART, which is making our habit goals measurable. And to that effect, we discussed how we could actually start writing a habit journal, which can map our progress towards our habit goal. When we write a habit journal and we actually jot down our progress day by day, we are able to see over a period of a week or a month how many days have we actually been successful in keeping up with our goal, how many days did we fail, what were the factors responsible for those days when we were successful, what were the factors or the parameters responsible when we failed. Those factors which were responsible for our success, we could repeat them. Those factors which were responsible for our failure, we would probably avoid them. This kind of a habit of writing a habit journal would make our progress in dealing with our bad habits measurable and tangible. On day 5 of our 21 Days Habit Challenge, I would like to leave you with 2 very crucial and important principles. The first principle: we have to learn how to stay away from or do away with all those stimuli that actually trigger the temptation of those things that we are trying to avoid. You know, I spoke to all of you about the story of my taking a vow, a resolve on the first day of Kartik to avoid eating sweets. And you may remember that on that very morning at 8 o'clock, my friend brought to me these 5 boxes of Lindt Lindor. I had a choice to either indulge or to improve. I chose to improve. I chose to pass the test. But simply choosing to pass the test internally and making that resolve wouldn't be sufficient. That's great, but wouldn't be sufficient when I'm not so strong from within. One of the crucial aspects would be that these 5 boxes of Lindt Lindor white chocolate truffles would be sitting in my room for the next 1 month. And if they would be sitting in my room, there was a good chance that I would give in to them. The stimulus was right there. And if the stimulus is right there for 1 full month, there's a chance that that stimulus would trigger that temptation to eat those truffles, and I might give in. So what did I do? Decided to do away with it and thereby to stay away from it. Just as my friend left, I called one of the monks from our monastery, our ashram, and gave away all these 5 boxes of the white chocolate truffles to him and said, why don't you distribute it amongst all of our monks? Which would mean each one would get about 1 or 2 of those truffles, which is hardly harmful really. So they were happy, thinking that I've given them such a precious gift, which actually I would have anyway shared with them. And I was happy because I took away that stimulus, which was a big risk for me to give in to that temptation and run away from my resolve. The 3 greatest fears earlier used to be, number 1, the fear of public speaking, number 2, the fear of death, and number 3, the fear of flying. In the modern day, however, those fears have changed. The 3 greatest fears in the modern day today are the battery of my smartphone is weak, I do not have sufficient Wi-Fi signal, internet connectivity, and you know that Sudarshan Chakra, that wheel going around, still buffering, still loading. Now jokes apart, isn't it a fact that many of us, when we wake up in the morning, we want to look for the charger and charge our phones before even we charge ourselves? Isn't it important that we charge ourselves before we actually charge our phones? Somebody was mentioning to me that he wants to moderate the use of his smartphones. That's his bad habit, that he's really addicted to using his smartphone all the time, and he wants to moderate that habit. Now, how do you moderate the habit of using your smartphone? That stimulus, your smartphone, is constantly along with you. From the time you wake up till the time you go to bed, the smartphone's just around you. And if the stimulus is around us, it's going to trigger that temptation to look at it and what's going on Facebook, what's going on WhatsApp, constantly respond to all of those things. In fact, I don't know if you've noted this, if you keep your phone in the silent mode, and that little buzz of a message coming up, because you can't hear the ring, the beep tone now, the little bzz kind of a buzz tone, it makes you alert. And sometimes you go to check your phone, which is kept just away, and realize that there's no message, but it's just going on in your head. My God, such an addiction, isn't it? Now, if you decide to moderate your use of the smartphone, I think there are going to be times through the day where you need to keep the phone away. For example, in the night, why do we need to keep the phone next to us? We could just keep the phone away from us. You would say, well, how would I get up? I would need an alarm, right? Use an alarm clock. We could just be using an alarm clock to wake up instead of using the alarm on the smartphone. Because if the phone is at a distance away, the temptation to pick it up the first thing in the morning would be the least. Also, we could keep the phone in a off mode rather than keeping it in the silent mode. If you keep the phone right next to your bed in the silent mode, and if you wake up in the night, you know how easy it is to come back from the flight safe mode and once again get into that whole cycle of checking your social media statuses, checking your messages, your emails, and ruining your sleep. So we just keep the phone away and we just turn it off. Because in order to get up, go get the phone and turn it on is going to take a while. So why not keep it away? Thus, if we keep our stimulus away, there is a good chance that we may be able to stick to our resolve of what we have decided. Now somebody may say, but I also have to do work-related stuff. I need to check some messages for work. Sometimes I suggest have a simpler phone. You know, if it's just about messages or receiving calls or even email, have a simpler phone without all of this social media, and you can keep that close to you because that wouldn't be much of a distraction really. There was something more serious than that. One young boy once came up to me and said, I'm really, really deeply and very badly addicted to internet pornography, and I've decided that I want to completely get out of it because the only one thing that's on my mind all day and practically all the time is this. So I just want to get rid of this addiction now. How do I do it? I told him one of the biggest stimulus is internet. If you're going to be in a private place and you have an internet connection, well, you can control yourself for a while, but the chances and the risks to give in to it are very high because the stimulus is just sitting right there, which can trigger that temptation out of you. I told them, when you're in a private place, in your room or in your office, just make sure that you don't have internet connectivity. And if you do need internet connectivity for your work, when you're in a private place, try and make sure that your internet connection is not a very private, secure one, but it is kind of a public connection where most everybody could watch what you're doing. And even a better thing is to have a daily accountability to someone where you could actually go and confess and seek help from that person to deal with it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the principle that I want to leave all of you with today, the first one is stay away from or do away with, as much as is possible for you, that stimulus that will trigger your temptation, and it'll make us give in to something that we decided we wouldn't fall for. The second principle I want to share with all of you is this. When it comes to things like internet usage, when it comes to things like smoking cigarettes, when it comes to things like avoiding a sweet, when it comes to things like moderating your smartphone usage, in one sense, it's difficult, but it's not all that hard to stay away from these triggers. It's not all that hard to stay away from the stimuli. What if the stimulus is a person in your family? Like I say, it's easy to handle your physical habits, giving up eating sweets, giving up smoking, or moderating your smartphone usage, or trying to give up internet pornography. Not all that, I know it's not easy, but it's not all that hard. But to give up our mental habits, our inner habits, which are anger, frustration, anxiety, getting affected by people around us, getting into phases of depression because of people around us, they are very difficult to handle actually. And the stimuli are going to be all around us. With sweets, you can chuck the sweets off and stay away from that stimulus. With smartphone, you can turn it off for those 3 hours, 4 hours, keep it in your drawer on the table and not look at it. With internet pornography, you could try and keep your laptops, your phones away when you're alone in the room, and you may not need it at all. And if you do need it, you can be accountable, you can somehow work on it. They're things, they're stuff. But when it comes to people, how are we going to deal with the surroundings, with the people around us? Those stimuli are extremely difficult to handle, and they're difficult to even take away. What do? I remember when I joined the ashram, the monastery in Mumbai, I was staying with all of our monks. My parents had been extremely careful in bringing me up in a way that I would not use loose language, I wouldn't use slangs. That's how I was brought up. I came to a monastery, and most all of our monks were either born and raised in Mumbai, India, or they were staying in some other place in India, but they came to Mumbai and stayed in Mumbai to study and had taken up jobs there, after which they decided to become monks. Now, the consequence of being born in Mumbai and raised in Mumbai, or having studied and lived in Mumbai for a while, is that you get affected by the surroundings, you get affected by the culture, the ethos, the language, and very often you tend to use words which are not derogatory, which are not obscene, which are not vulgar, but they're not the best words to use when you speak to people. I remember staying in our ashram, in our monastery, and within about 4 to 5 months, one day something happened, a problem happened, and I ended up saying, "Arey, bahut bada lafda ho gaya." Now, for those of you who don't understand Hindi, or those of you who don't understand this kind of Hindi, lafda means a problem. It's a kind of a slang. It's not derogatory, it's not vulgar or obscene, but it's not the most pleasant or the most sophisticated and decent word to use for a problem in Hindi. So I ended up saying, "Ek bahut bada lafda ho gaya." Now, within a moment, I just pinched myself to ask myself this question: hey, wait a minute. How is it that for all your life you never used this word, and suddenly how did you use that word? Realized, surroundings, people around, the most amazing people, the most spiritual, sincere, genuine people. Some of the most amazing relationships I formed with people in our monastery, our monks whom I live with. But most of them used words like these. And the entire culture, the ethos was like that. I ended up saying the word lafada one day. Now, how do I take myself out of that surrounding? That's my home. These are the best people to live with. Either I get affected by the surrounding, or I can choose to affect the surrounding. Me being alone in the middle of about 80 monks, affecting the surrounding God was not easy. But then I decided that I have to become more cautious and conscious in a way that I don't get affected by what's going on around. To remain unaffected by people, to remain unaffected by the surroundings where people live, one has to start becoming more mindful, more cautious, more conscious, in a way that we don't get affected. In a way those people around, those stimuli, do not trigger that response or that reaction out of us. I'm sure many of you go through these kind of situations. You may be living in families where your parents, your spouses, your children, your siblings could be a very strong stimulus to agitate your minds, to make you angry, to make you frustrated. I'm sure many of you go through situations where at your workplace there could be your colleagues, your bosses, your managers, who could just be the people they are, and they could be a very strong trigger to bring out that anger out of you. I'm sure many of you who are students may realize that at your university and your schools, you may kind of go through that situation where some of the friends around act as a stimulus, constantly poking you and bringing that bad side out of you. Now, to be honest, in many of these situations, it's not all that easy to stay away from or do away with the stimulus that incites that response to us. What do? There's one choice we have: to start becoming extremely cautious, conscious, and mindful in a way that what's happening around either doesn't affect us or affects us in a minimal possible way. That conscious living is our choice, and we'll elaborate on this a little more as we move on in our 21 days habit challenge. Therefore, the two principles that I want to leave all of you with this morning on day 5 of our habit challenge is: number 1, with things and stuff, stay away from and do away with those stimuli which trigger that temptation that you're trying to avoid. And with surroundings and people who act as a stimulus, let's learn how to be cautious, conscious, and more mindful in a way that people around don't incite us, don't agitate us, don't bring out that wrong response from us, and we are not affected, or we are affected to the minimum possible degree. I wish all of you a great day ahead. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I hope to see you all once again tomorrow at Indian Standard Time, 8 o'clock. Thank you. Hare Krishna.